An Israelite father stands in the doorway of a stone house in the hill country of Ephraim. When the entire survival of the people hangs by a thread, you start to see a shadow structure holding the narrative together. The elders recognize what is happening right in front of them. The house of Elimelech has fallen into ruin. The sons are dead. The architecture of the family is lying in rubble. They do not pray for a warrior to conquer new territory. They do not pray for a king to issue a decree. They pray for a builder. Ruth is not a tragic widow, begging for scraps in the margins of the harvest. She is the gatekeeper of the lineage. Without her fierce, unbending loyalty to an empty woman, the line of Judah fractures. Without her courage on the cold threshing floor, the grandfather of King David is never born. Without a daughter stepping in to do the work of Bana, the genealogy of the Messiah snaps in half before the story even reaches a manger in Bethlehem. The sons provide the legal name on the deed, but the daughters provide the living architecture. When the system is whole, the sons defend the borders. When the system shatters, the daughters rebuild the house. But this divine design, this beautiful structural necessity woven into the very letters of the Hebrew language, does not survive the machinery of human pride. As the centuries pass, the vision of the builder begins to fade, and a new, deeply broken valuation takes its place. The true question of the ancient family is not who holds the spear. It is this: we live in a culture that has entirely forgotten the architecture of the ancient text. We sit under fluorescent lights, staring at glass screens, measuring human worth by a brutal, modern calculus. We value the conquerors. We celebrate the ones who hold the spear, the ones who claim the corner office, the ones whose names are printed in heavy black ink on the title deeds of our society. We have built an entire world around the logic of the sons, a world obsessed with borders, expansion, accumulation, and visible dominance. And in this system, the builders are pushed to the margins. If you look at your own life, you can probably feel the weight of this broken valuation in your own chest. You might be in a season where you feel completely invisible because your work does not come with a public title. You might be the one keeping the peace in a fractured home. You might be sitting in the quiet, sterile hum of a hospital waiting room, or smelling the sharp scent of hot coffee at 4 in the morning. As you carry the deep anxieties of the people you love, the modern world looks at that hidden, exhausting work. Who holds the walls together? And the answer changes how you read every family tree in your Bible, and calls it secondary. It calls it domestic. It calls it passive. But the Hebrew text demands a completely different lens. The quiet work of holding things together is not a secondary role. It is the foundational architecture of reality. When you sit with a grieving friend, when you raise a child in a chaotic world, when you refuse to let bitterness tear a community apart, you are doing the work of Bana. You are functioning as the structural integrity of your environment. You are the load-bearing wall, holding the roof up while the storm rages outside. Our modern tragedy is that we have mistaken visibility for value. We think the one holding the microphone or the sword is the center of the story. But the ancient writers knew that when the famine hits and the wars begin, the microphone means absolutely nothing. The only thing that matters is the strength of the walls. Your value is not determined by the territory you conquer. It is measured by the ruins you rebuild. Yet, this linguistic design is not just a profound metaphor for human families. The Creator weaves this exact language into His own relationship with His people. Because centuries after Ruth, we live in a culture terrified of being invisible. We measure our value by what we can produce. When the nation of Israel is facing its darkest hour, when the dust of the Babylonian war machines is rising thick on the horizon, and the city walls are about to fall, God does not cry out to a nation of warriors. Babylon surrounds the city. The siege ramps go up. Heavy iron battering rams strike the limestone. The walls crack. You can hear the stone splitting. You can smell the burning cedar. This is the darkest hour of the Old Testament. The armies of Nebuchadnezzar are destroying everything. The men of war are falling. The king is blinded in chains. The kingdom is ending. The boundary stones are lost. And in this moment of total collapse, listen to the language of the prophets. God does not address a defeated army. He does not weep over the fallen sons of Israel. He cries out to the daughter. He calls the city Bat Sion, the daughter of Zion. Isaiah weeps for her. Jeremiah writes funeral dirges for her. Micah calls to her in the dark. The title appears over 60 times in the prophetic texts. It is a relentless drumbeat in the exile. Why? Because the city is the architecture of God's presence on earth. She was designed to build. She was meant to be the Bana. She was supposed to hold the walls together for the entire world to see. But she rebelled. What we can conquer. What we can force the world to recognize. We assume that if we are not the head of the table, she fractured. She forgot her name. And now the house is falling. Isaiah writes that the daughter of Zion is left like a shelter in a vineyard, a ruined hut, an empty shell in a devastated field. The title is not a poetic metaphor. It is a diagnosis of a shattered design. The prophets mourn the daughter because, when the builder falls, the entire family of humanity is left homeless in the dark. But the prophets also carry a promise. The rubble is not the final word. The exile will not last forever. God promises to return for the daughter. He promises to rebuild the builder. Zechariah shouts it into the ruins. Sing and rejoice, O daughter of Zion, for behold, I come and I will dwell in your midst. He promises to lay her stones with colorful gems. He promises to make her foundations with sapphires. He is coming back to restore the broken architecture. The prophets fall silent. The centuries pass. The stones lie quiet. And then, a rabbi walks into a noisy, chaotic house in Galilee, where a 12-year-old girl lies dead on a bed. And he fulfills the ancient prophetic promise in the most intimate way imaginable. The Gospel writers compose their accounts in Greek, a language of philosophy and precision. But beneath the Greek text of Mark chapter 5, you can still hear the ancient Hebrew architecture trying to break through the surface. You can hear the echo of the builder. If our name is not the one written on the deed, we have no real worth. If you have ever felt like a footnote in someone else's story, a synagogue ruler named Jairus pushes through a suffocating crowd by the Sea of Galilee. His 12-year-old daughter is dying. He begs the rabbi from Nazareth to come and lay his hands on her. And Jesus agrees. But on the way, the crushing crowd comes to a sudden halt. A woman who has been bleeding for 12 years, a woman whose very biology of life has been a broken, unending cycle of loss, reaches out and touches his garment. Jesus stops. He looks at this terrified outcast, a woman the religious elite have deemed permanently unclean. And he speaks a word of profound covering. He calls her daughter. It is the Greek word Vigator, the exact translation of the Hebrew bat. It is the only time in the entire New Testament that Jesus directly addresses a woman with this specific title. He does not call her woman, he calls her builder. He looks at a life that is completely in ruins. A woman who has no husband to defend, her boundary stones, and no sons to carry her name. And he reestablishes her structural integrity. He restores her to the family of God. Then, the messengers arrive from Jairus' house. They deliver the crushing blow. The child is dead. Jesus ignores the finality of their words. If you have ever questioned whether the God of the ancient world viewed women as secondary characters, the truth is waiting in the dirt of the biblical world. He continues walking to the house. You can hear the professional mourners already wailing in the courtyard. The discordant, haunting notes of the burial flutes, the heavy scent of myrrh hanging in the warm afternoon air. He forces the chaos outside. He takes only the parents and his 3 closest friends into the quiet room, where the small body lies motionless on the bed. He reaches down and takes her cold, lifeless hand in his. And he speaks Aramaic. Talitha Kumi, little girl, arise. She breathes. She opens her eyes. She stands up and walks. This is not a random display of divine power to impress. A grieving village. It is a profound, structural restoration. Within a single afternoon, Jesus encounters a woman whose life has been bleeding. out for 12 years, and a 12-year-old girl whose life has just ended. In both moments, he steps directly into the ruins of human suffering and does the exact work of the Bana. He takes the shattered architecture of the daughters, the ones the ancient world viewed as liabilities in the face of tragedy, and he rebuilds them from the ground up. He is declaring that the daughter is worth the interruption of his urgent journey. She is worth the touch that makes a rabbi ritually unclean. A daughter is not an afterthought of creation. She is the architecture of the future. To feel the weight of this reality, she is worth the very breath of God. But this double healing is only a localized moment, in a dusty room in Galilee. The true weight of this restoration, the reason this specific linguistic design matters for every single person walking. The earth today only becomes clear when you zoom all the way out to the end of the biblical story. God took a rib in the ancient garden, and the foundational architecture of humanity was built. Sarai and Rachel wept for a future, and they became the builders of the house of Israel. 5 sisters stood before Moses in the dust, and the unbending laws of the ancient world bowed to the daughters. A foreign widow lay on a cold threshing floor, and the shattered lineage of Judah was repaired. A burning city was called the Daughter of Zion, and the Almighty promised to return to her ruins. An outcast touched the hem of a rabbi's garment, and 12 years of bleeding were covered by a single name. A 12-year-old girl lay breathless on a bed, and the Lord of Life commanded the builder to rise. You have to step past the English translations. You have to walk into the dust of the ancient tribal camps. One route, one design. But maybe the part that stays with me most is those 5 sisters in the wilderness. Mahlah, Noah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Tirzah. They didn't shrink back when the men who held the spears disappeared. They walked straight to the entrance of the tabernacle, stood in the hot wind of the Moabite plains, and demanded the dirt. They knew their identity was tied to the root Bana. They knew their name meant builder, and they refused to let their father's house fall into oblivion. If you are in a season where you feel completely invisible, where your daily labor comes with no public recognition and no title on a door, I hear the language of the text. If you are the one keeping the peace in a fractured family, if you are sitting by a hospital bed in the dark, or holding back the chaos in a dying community, you are not a secondary character. You are the load-bearing wall. Your value is not determined by the territory you conquer. It is measured by the ruins you rebuild. If this opens something in you, subscribe. Leave a comment. Even one word helps. Share this with someone who is quietly holding things together and needs to know they are seen. Pray for us as we keep digging into these texts. You have to understand how a desert nomad calculates survival, and why the birth of a girl was the only thing standing between a family and extinction. And may the God who has always entrusted his future to the builders breathe strength into your tired hands and remind you that the walls you are holding up in the dark will outlast the empires of tomorrow. The evening wind is biting, carrying the scent of wild thyme and dry dust. Inside the dimly lit room, a midwife wipes a newborn clean. A patriarch sits in the heavy shade of a black goat hair tent. He watches his flocks kicking up dust on the horizon. He measures the remaining water in the leather skin, and he looks at the sons who will defend this fragile existence. This is the ancient economy of survival, drawn in the harsh sand of the Near East. To the modern mind, the biblical emphasis on sons feels like an injustice permanently written in stone. We read the ancient genealogy's endless pages of heavy ink, declaring he fathered, he fathered, he fathered, and we quickly conclude that the biblical world viewed women merely as disposable vessels. We see a strict legal framework where property passes exclusively through the male line, where the sun-baked boundary stones of a family's inheritance are tied securely to the sons of the house. It looks, from our comfortable distance, like an aggressive system designed to erase the daughters completely. We judge the ancient texts by modern standards of individualism, assuming this structure existed solely to elevate the men and oppress the women. But the ancient tribal system is not a hierarchy of human worth. It is a desperate mechanism for societal preservation. It is a girl. The father does not weep in disappointment. He does not turn his face to the wall in mourning for a lost son. In the unforgiving, cracked landscape of the ancient Levant, starvation was always hovering, just one dry winter away. Land was not liquid wealth you could trade on a market. Nor was it a status symbol to be flaunted. The land was the literal source of life. The only thing producing the grain and the oil that kept a family breathing through the winter. If that land was fractured, if it was divided and carried off into different tribes, every time a daughter married an outsider, the core family would lose its capacity to produce food. They would starve within a single generation. The strict inheritance laws were forged in the fires of necessity, designed to keep the life-giving soil intact so the lineage could endure. The sons were the designated guardians of the dirt. They were tasked with holding the borders, fighting the raiders, and working the fields that belonged to their fathers. This was their heavy, unyielding responsibility in a violent world. But this purely functional legal framework creates a massive, glaring linguistic paradox hiding right beneath the surface of the text. If the sons are the exclusive legal inheritors, if the boys are the ones tasked with carrying the family name, he walks into the small room, takes the fragile weight into his calloused hands, and he smiles. This is a scene most modern minds cannot compute, and securing the physical property. Why did the ancient Hebrews choose the specific word they did for a female child? The English language gives us daughter, a word with uncertain Germanic roots that carries no profound theological weight. But the Hebrew language does not waste its breath on meaningless labels. Every word is a theology, and the word chosen for the daughter reveals a truth that completely subverts our assumptions about who was actually building the future. To see the value they tried to erase, you have to look at the architecture of the Hebrew alphabet itself. A scribe dips his reed pen into dark ink. He presses it against rough parchment. He is writing the ancient family laws. He traces the ancient letters with careful precision. Now, look at the words forming on the page. Look at the Hebrew language itself. Genesis chapter 2, verse 21. God takes a rib from the man. He fashions a woman. He brings her to the man. But the English word fashions hides the truth. The Hebrew word used here is bana. It means to build. It means to construct a wall, to erect a fortress, to establish a temple. Solomon uses bana when he raises the temple in Jerusalem. Most people read the ancient texts and assume the ancient Near East was nothing but a patriarchal factory, a world where sons were the only currency that mattered. You can hear the heavy stone hammers ringing out in the quarry. You can smell the cut cedar beams of Lebanon. Bana is the language of enduring architecture, and bana is the exact root of the Hebrew word for daughter. The word is bat. The son, ben, comes from the same root. But while the culture elevated the son as the sole heir, the language refuses to leave the daughter behind. The text weaves them together. The son guards the boundary stones. The daughter constructs the household. The son defends the borders. The daughter builds the legacy. The son holds the spear. The daughter holds the walls together. Look at Genesis 16. Sarai is barren. She is desperate for a future. She gives her servant Hagar to Abram. She says, "Perhaps I shall be built up through her." The English translators smooth it out to say, "obtain children." But the Hebrew is literal. Bana. Sarai is looking for architecture. Rachel and Leah are weeping and fighting. They are watching their family grow. The text says they built up the house of Israel. The word is bana. Ruth stands in the dusty threshing floor. The town elders bless her. They pray she will be like Rachel and Leah, where a son meant security, land, and a future. Where a daughter was just a temporary guest. Who built the house of Israel? The word is bana. Every time the biblical writers want to describe the survival of the nation, they do not use the language of warfare. They use the language of daughters. A daughter is not a biological accident. She is the architecture of the lineage. The bat is the one doing the bana. When an ancient Israelite looked at a baby girl, they did not just see a future bride. They saw a builder, a structural necessity. Without her, the lineage fractures. Without her, the family ceases to exist. The names are not labels. They are blueprints. But what happens when the system fails? What happens when a father dies in the wilderness? The land is threatened. And there are absolutely no sons to hold the boundary stones? The hot wind of the Moabite plains whips against the heavy linen curtains of the tabernacle courtyard. 5 women stand in the dust, the murmur of the Israelite camp pressing in around them. Their names are Mahlah, Noah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Tirzah. Their father, Zelophehad, died in the harsh wilderness of Sinai, leaving behind no sons to inherit his name or his portion. The census is finally complete. The promised land is being divided by the tribal leaders. And according to the unbending legal logic of the ancient world, a liability you had to feed until you paid someone else to take her away. You hear it in the way we talk about the genealogies. Their family line is about to be completely erased. The boundary stones will be given to distant cousins, and their father's name will vanish permanently from the records of Manasseh. But these 5 women do not retreat into the shadows of the camp. They walk directly to the entrance of the tent of meeting, standing before Moses, Eleazar the priest, the leaders, and the entire congregation. They demand an inheritance among their father's brothers. They demand that their father's name be preserved in the dirt of the new world. If something about this story is making you realize how much depth is hiding in the details we usually skim past, you're exactly who this channel is for. Drop a thought in the comments and hit subscribe. Because every week, we dig past the English translations to find the architecture underneath. So Moses takes their unprecedented case directly to the presence of God. And God's response is immediate and definitive. He tells Moses that the daughters of Zelophehad are entirely right. The ancient law is amended on the spot, establishing a brand new legal statute for the nation. If a man dies without a son, his inheritance must pass directly to his daughter. We often read this passage in the book of Numbers, the steady drumbeat of men. Abraham begot Isaac. Isaac begot Jacob, a line stretching through time like a heavy iron chain, forging the history of a nation as a rare, progressive moment of ancient women's rights, an anomaly dropped into a patriarchal text. But when you remember the Hebrew word bat, when you understand that the daughter is fundamentally defined by the root word bana to build their actions, take on an entirely different weight. They are not protesting the system. They are acting as the true architecture of the lineage. When the sons are gone and the men have perished in the desert, the daughters do exactly what their name declares they were designed to do. They step into the breach. They claim the physical soil. And they build up the house of their father so that it will not fall into ruin. They force the legal framework of the nation to bend to the linguistic reality of their identity. But what happens when the land is already lost? What happens when a family is shattered not just by a lack of sons, but by famine, exile, and the bitter grief of an empty harvest? It is midnight on a threshing floor in Bethlehem. The air smells of crushed barley and cold wind. A young Moabite widow lies quietly at the feet of a sleeping man, the rough wool of his cloak pulled over her shoulders. She does not belong here. She is a foreigner. She is entirely without rights. She is tethered to an embittered mother-in-law, a woman named Naomi. But if you look closer at the language, at the quiet spaces between the famous stories, at the moments, who walked back into this town and told the women to call her Mara, bitter, because the Almighty had emptied her out completely. Naomi lost her husband. Naomi lost her 2 sons. The lineage of Elimelech is effectively dead. The ancestral land is lost. The future is buried in the foreign dirt of Moab. The law of the sons has failed them. The boundary stones mean nothing when the men who are supposed to hold them have vanished. But watch what happens to the language when the legal system collapses. When Boaz awakens in the dark, startled by a presence at his feet, he does not cast her out. He speaks a word of profound covering. He calls her Bat, my daughter. And when the town elders gather at the city gate in the bright morning sun to finalize the redemption of Naomi's land, they do not merely sign a legal document. They speak a prophetic blessing that echoes all the way back to the foundations of Genesis. They look at this foreign widow, and they ask the Lord to make her like Rachel and like Leah The two women who built the house of Israel. There is that root again. Bana,